Hi, everyone. Welcome to our AES talk today. I'm here with Josh Rogosin.
Hello.
Hi, Josh. Thanks for being with us today, and to everybody watching. I'm just gonna let you know a little bit about Josh. Josh started working with NPR in 1999, and he's worked with shows like Studios 360 and Ask Me Another. And he's now the technical director for NPR Music and has recorded over 500 Tiny Desk concerts and counting. He's been with the company for a while, and today we are going to talk all things Tiny Desk. So thank you for being with us, Josh.
My pleasure. Glad you invited me, Jeanne. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for coming. All right, let's just dive in here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and how you landed Tiny Desk?
I started my professional career in theater at the North Shore Music Theater in Beverly, Massachusetts. And my first real professional gig was in Washington, D.C. at the Shakespeare Theatre. And I was living just up the street, and I used to walk by NPR's old headquarters on my way to the theater to mix live shows and thought, oh, I've heard of NPR. I should go in there and check it out. So I literally walked in off the street, got a job listings page, didn't think I was qualified, and they needed some summer fill in help, and started working in what was called the Record Centrals, taking in feeds from reporters from all over the world and recording them via ISDN, grabbing FTP over the telephone, and fixing audio in real time as we were capturing it to quarter-inch tape, because this was back in 1999. And from there, I graduated to mixing the features in studios and then actually driving, as we call it, the live broadcasts of All Things Considered and Morning Edition, all those news radio type shows. And Bob Boylan was the director of All Things Considered for many years, and I had done some engineering. So we got along famously, sharing different music ideas back and forth. He would always have to choose the music between each of the news stories, and that turned into basically NPR music. People would write into Bob and say, "Hey, what was that song you played? I really want to play that or know what that song is." So he started basically before podcasting. He started the first online streaming show called All Songs Considered, and it's been going strong for 17 years now. And out of All Songs Considered, Tiny Desk was born.
We're gonna be going back and forth here between presentation here, and I'm just gonna pop in here so we can see some of your early photos here.
Cool.
Hello. So you want to tell us about what we're seeing here?
Yes. So before I did any sort of music recording, I would be out in the field as sort of an audio journalist, capturing sounds. In this top picture, it's a voodoo festival and ritual in Benin, West Africa. And I would play with different sound gathering techniques, basically for storytelling purposes. Um, it was a co-production between National Geographic and National Public Radio, and I wanted the audio to sound as vivid and as amazing as, of course, the National Geographic photographs look. So I gathered together in this top picture, there's 4 omnidirectional MKH-20s that I fashioned on tent poles, and which is a tip I got from engineer Flan Williams. One thing about working at NPR is all the engineers really love to help each other. So we devised this system of basically recording quad omnidirectional sound, which I took out and recorded to 2 Sony D8 DAT recorders via Sonosax preamps. Talk about old school. And shot loads and loads of tape there. And the bottom photograph is another National Geographic expedition I did in Nemea, Greece, leading up to the 2004 Summer Olympics in Athens. And in that Zeppelin is an MKH 30 and an MKH 40. The 30 is a bidirectional mic, the 40 is a directional mic to make MS stereo, which needs to be decoded in post production. And basically, these different sound gathering techniques that I learned out in the field, I apply in how I record every Tiny Desk concert. The other rig that you can see on that bottom photograph is it's actually just a wire hanger wrapped around my headphones, and you can see two little black dots. Those are DPA 4060 omnidirectional mics to sort of mimic binaural audio recording. So basically, in these two photographs, you'll see the quad spaced omnis in the top helicopter photo, and in the bottom photo, you'll see the MS stereo and the Zeppelin, and the spaced omnis or the binaural recording, rather, on my headband. And those were sort of different rigs that I would test out in the field, recording music and stories, and yeah, just to paint vivid scenes and pictures through sound, through an incredible series that I miss I miss dearly.
It's very creative coat hanger. I like that.
Yeah, that's patented. That was all me.
Very good. So you started to mention briefly how Tiny Desk got its start. So where did it? Where? Let's talk about that.
So NPR Music has been going to music festivals for a while, South by Southwest, which sadly, of course, got canceled this past March. The story goes that Bob Boylan, who's the director of All Things Considered, founded All Songs Considered, which sort of led to the creation of NPR Music. He was out listening to music with his colleague, Stephen Thompson, who is the host of Pop Culture Happy Hour and also an editor at NPR Music and a writer. They were both at a bar in Austin, and as the story goes, they went to hear Laura Gibson play. And there was a lot of loud chatter and maybe even a football game or a baseball game blaring on the television set as she was trying to play this very intimate, beautiful acoustic music. And as a joke, after the set, they said, we think it sounded pretty good, but, why don't, when you come back to Washington, you come and play at Bob's desk? And she said, all right, I'll take you up on that. And she called their bluff, as the story goes, and said, hey, I'm in DC. Can I come over and play my concert? And Bob said, all right, I guess we have to find some cameras and stuff. And they just dusted off some DV cameras that the online production team had at NPR, folks like Matt Katziff and Mike Katziff and Bobby Carter, who were working on online production, kind of were at the birth of this whole series. And one thing led to another. It went up on their blog. It became way more successful than they ever thought it could. And then all of a sudden, they just started asking people to play instead of in our beautiful state-of-the-art multi-million-dollar recording studio at NPR. They said, just come and play at Bob's desk. We'll make it casual. It'll just be about you and the music, and it'll be a tiny desk concert, not because the desk, because the length of the concert.
Nice. Good to know. I always thought it was the desk.
Yeah, that's funny.
So it's now kind of become one of the best spaces to check out artists or new artists, even in a very intimate setting. So let's break down kind of what a typical day looks like. I'm just gonna pull up your slide. All right.
So what we're looking at here is Corey Henry's Tiny Desk. He was in Snarky Puppy as well, keyboard player, and he is an incredible musician and songwriter in his own right. So he came and did his own Tiny Desk concert. And as you can see, hanging above the Tiny Desk is no longer there. It was on loan from Neumann Sennheiser. Was this KU 100, also known as the Fritz, binaural recording head, which I loved, kind of just hanging as this disembodied head audience member, capturing mostly just the audience applause, and then certainly louder instruments like horns could get picked up in that mic position. But basically, it was just sort of what would it be like to be an audience member above the desk in the perfect spot. So that's really the vantage point that I mix in all of the audience applause. I have it in somewhat during the concert, but I usually ride the levels pretty dramatically and have it up high for the audience bits. And then, of course, we can see his Leslie amp. I've got two MKH40s, one on the horn section and one on the more bassy section there. And yeah, it's a pretty stripped down setup. There's probably, I don't know, I limit myself to 16 channels max. So, of course, two are burned by that head in the air, two are burned by the MS stereo shotgun mic, which we'll talk about I'm sure in a little bit, the 418S by Sennheiser is the stereo shotgun mic. It's MS, so it's got the directional mic and the bidirectional mic, just like the one did in the Zeppelin, but it's in a very tight package. And it enables you to sure pick up your main vocalist, but a little bit further back, so it doesn't obscure their performance, their face as they're performing. Um, and it just picks up some other things, and it gives it some sense of localization because it's stereo. And basically, the way you decode MS is you've got the directional mic, the bidirectional mic. You duplicate the bidirectional mic on two channels, and the first of which you pan hard left, the second you pan hard right, and then you flip the phase on the one on the right. When you bring up the side faders, it actually determines how wide your stereo image is. So that's the real magic of that Sennheiser 418S MS stereo shotgun mic, which my predecessor, Kevin Waite, who has so much to do with why the series sounds like it does, he first decided to use that MS stereo mic to capture music, just kind of make it like a bootleg sound rather than a close mic'd, plosive popping, other sort of more intimate studio experience. It sounds a little bit more natural.
Nice. And so, I mean, going off of that, you mentioned you stick to 16 channels. What kind of equipment are you using? Pre's and you said how many
So
channels? Another
this
photo.
is a great
You can look.
segue. This photo on the right, you'll see my setup. I actually had these are two sound devices, 788T hard disk based recorders well, they actually record to SSD and compact flash simultaneously. So they're always printing two sets of files, which I really appreciate because sometimes a file gets corrupt. So I love the redundancy in these machines. I love that they're not hooked up to a computer, which is this comes back to sort of the NPR field gathering, news gathering, ENG style of recording, which I really appreciate. These machines are not necessarily built for music recording, but these sound devices, preamps, and the 788Ts especially have super clean, beautiful sounding mic preamps. Anything you throw at them is great as long as you have all the adapters to get into the jacks. And they link together beautifully with word clock with an RJ11 cable that's it's rewired so that they can kind of talk bidirectional. And I actually have a third 788T. That's my personal machine that I usually do a 2-track to. And I've been starting to break my rule a little bit when the bands are huge and I really want to capture something direct. I'll add my own personal 788T to the chain. So, I mean, technically I could do 24, but I really purposefully try to limit it to 16 because part of the spirit of it, the way Kevin Waite first started the series, he had the MS stereo mic and maybe some audience mics, and that was it. I think first it was just the MS stereo mic. Then you talk to the musicians about really listening to each other, adjusting their levels so that they can really um, get their mix down, and you as engineer are then working with them to say, hey, oh, can you move back a little bit, that violin's cutting through too much, double bass is a little low, can you come a little closer, when you're vocalizing, please get really close together so I can get all of it. And I've taken some of that, like with one of my favorite tapings was for Monsieur Pyrénées, which is a
Mm,
band from Bogota I absolutely love.
great, yeah.
And they're used to each having their 3 vocal mics, they're spread stage, and I didn't have enough inputs. And they brought 2 drummers, and there's just a lot of stuff. So for this vocal part, it's just a couple parts here and there. I really need you guys to lean in, and the 2 folks on this side, can you really just like belt out your parts? You really need to get close. And they're like, oh, like this. I say, no, 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 squish together, get really, really close. And then if you watch the video, it's like there are 3 little heads, and this, and I actually love the intimacy of that. I love the way that looks on camera. It's not just the fact that I was limited in inputs, and certainly I could set up their own mics if I wanted to and sub it. But that goes against the spirit of it.
You're capturing a moment as opposed to
That's
doing it
right.
in post.
That's right. It's a much more of it's just like going out in West Africa and recording voodoo rituals, you know, architects, archaeological digs in Athens. I'm capturing something that's already happening. It's like a concert where it's behind a desk. We invite an audience in, and I'm just there as a journalist. And that's why I think Tiny Desk can only live at a place like NPR because it's really it's journalism, and that's how I approach it.
Nice. How long in advance are you able to plan ahead, and how long do you have on game day, like for setup?
It depends, of course. Usually, if Bob Boylan had his way, there would be zero planning. They show up, we kind of figure it out. You just throw them behind the desk, and that's it. But of course, the series has gotten pretty big, and there's a lot of musicians behind the desk sometimes, like with Snow Allegra when she came through with her band and a full orchestra practically, or with Hades Town, which is an unbelievable Broadway production that we just had published about a week ago. There's just too much happening not to plan. So I have to figure out how I'm going to mic everything, how I'm going to jam everything into 16 inputs if I can. And yeah, so here's the picture of Hades Town. You've got two MKH 40s, which are small diaphragm condensers behind the piano, ORTF, really close up so I can get that nice separation. The cello had this Ear Trumpet Labs mic that I quite liked, rather than just taking a direct out of the cello, which sounds awfully bowed instruments. Anytime an instrument is, I think for pizzicato, I'll take a DI, but anytime something's bowed, I'll want a mic on it if I can. Um, and it was just such a big setup. I had, 8 there's 16 people behind the desk. It's crazy.
Wow.
There's the cellist, the piano player, the double bass, there's a violinist, the drummer, there's a guitarist, there's another guitarist, and then there's like 8 actors. So I had the MS stereo mic in the middle for the main actors, or just the actors that were in the center. And then I had 2 ear trumpet labs flanking on either side, and then 2 more mono Sennheiser 416 shotguns. And they kind of all had to gather around, and we did a bit of choreography with a run through. So it basically depends. Like I might have a couple days. I could be put into the loop. Basically, there's a staff of producers at NPR Music who are incredible. It's not just Bob who picks the bands. I and Stephen Thompson pitched Hades Town. I've been trying to get more and more Broadway onto the tiny desk. Blue Man Group was the very first sort of theatrical performance. I had loved Blue Man Group as a kid, and that was something that I had dreamed about. You know, they approached me about coming on to Ask Me Another to do our quiz show, where I had been a producer and I just started at NPR Music at full time as the technical director. And I said, why don't you guys come do a tiny desk instead? Like with the Blue Men, not the original players, obviously. And we devised this crazy pre-roll of them running around the building and grabbing equipment. So this picture on the right is the Blue Man, in our equipment room, our quartermaster in at NPRQ. And, in addition to grabbing all of these different cables, they tossed me into the case as well as their audio engineer, which I thought was hilarious. And it's just such a highlight. I love bringing these shows, but there's an incredible roster of producers at NPR Music who have specialized genres. So, Felix Contreras picks most of our Latin artists, like Natalia Lafourcade was one of my favorite, Monsieur Pyrenees, as I mentioned. There's just so many wonderful Latin artists who've been through. And then you've got, Sydney Madden and Bobby Carter and Abby O'Neill, who really have their finger on the pulse of all the hip hop that's happening, as well as the R&B music. Tom Heisinger chooses a lot of our classical selections, gets folks in like Yo-Yo Ma and other amazing people. And then on the left on this other picture, we actually were invited to the White House, Obama's White House, to produce a tiny desk. And Abby O'Neill asked Common to come, and it's just an incredible group of performers. This is down in the library. And another thing that I love about the Tiny Desk rig is it's all can be battery operated because it's ENG, sound devices gear. And the preamps are awesome. I don't use any. We have an incredible, decent mic closet at NPR. We've got lots of amazing preamps available to me, like a lunchbox and Millennia, but I just keep it simple for the tiny desk. And quite frankly, the sound devices preamps sound beautiful. I record it at 2448 and record to internal hard drive and a compact flash simultaneously. And I transfer the compact flash files into Pro Tools and do all the very fine tuning, anal retentive leveling of each individual thing that I possibly can. muting lots of mics when I'm not using them, that kind of thing. But yeah, that's basically the setup.
Cool. So, I mean, speaking of Yo-Yo Ma, let's get into some of the technical details and some of your like simplest setups. And
Sure.
we have a little video here of Sir Yo-Yo Ma.
I just have to clap at the screen. It's so good. He's so good.
He is great, yeah. So tell us a little bit about like what kind of challenges did you run into even for something that's simple when it's just one person and a cello?
Well, the first thing I like to do is um, during sound check, get down on my knees and stick my head where I want the mic to go. Some people, I also want a really intimate sound at Tiny Desk because I don't want it to sound like I want it to sound like you're right on top of it, like you're sitting right across from him rather than you're in a hall. That's why you don't hear very much reverb. There certainly is some. I also, in that particular instance, I just put an MKH40 again, right where my ear, where it sounded good. People say that, that would be considered his working tone. I was reading in the comments, and Yo-Yo Ma has one of the most, wonderful working tones in the world that you don't necessarily hear all the time. Then I probably had that in maybe 70%, but then I had the MS stereo mic in maybe 30%, and I had the audience mics in maybe 30%. But then on that direct working tone signal that's making up most of the sound, I put on an isotope stereo imager because I didn't want it to sound so mono because that's not how we hear. I had two ears down there. I could put a stereo mic, that would have been good too, but I wanted to keep it as low key as possible. So I use a stereoizer a lot especially when I don't have a lot of channels, to make DIs and mono instruments sound um, more real. So yeah, you'll see in that picture, there's the MS stereo is the red, so you'll see the directional mic on top and the bidirectional on the bottom. The sound is coming from the front. And then I'm just using a decoder right in Pro Tools called the S1 matrix. Yeah, to decode it. And then if it's too wide, I can bring in the pan pots. I know how to decode it manually, of course, but I'm lazy. So I just use the plugin. Yeah.
I mean,
And then I
it
can't
works.
show
It
you
works.
the, yeah, it works, right? Whatever works. I mean, honestly, I think of all of the computer stuff as a tool. And of course, all of the mics, everything else is quite frankly, 99% of why anything sounds good is because uh, engineers are using their ears and making level adjustments and EQ.
How much time do you have on the back end for post? How long does it take to get through?
There's usually quite a backlog. We'll tape 3 or 4 shows a week, sometimes 5, and we only publish 3. So what happens is we end up having more content than we can put out because we only want to publish 3 a week. We don't want to oversaturate the YouTube channel. So sometimes we just published Alicia Keys today, which is came out great, or maybe it was yesterday, and we taped that in February. So sometimes a really long time. And in that particular instance, they did want to hear it. I sent it to them, and knock on wood, I had no notes. Sometimes I do have notes. Sometimes they're like, "Can you please add some reverb? Can you add some effects?" There's a pretty strict line of thought that goes behind that. If you can notice it, then it's too much. I'll definitely put on some reverb and some stereoizer and some pretty dramatic EQ to really make things pop. But it's like I want it to sound like real life, but larger than life, larger than real life, but not. It's enhanced real life rather than studio trickery.
Right. So there are some rules you're saying as they relate to the sound that you have to in your mixing.
Yeah, really, again, if Bob hears any reverb, he'll say, take that off. So I really need to go in and ride that. And, if you have a really quiet player and you have to boost them a lot, sometimes the reverb really, you can notice it a lot more. So I'll have to, make it drier during the quiet bits, add it back in when it's loud. I didn't used to do that. Like if you listen to Leanne LaHavas, it sounds a bit wet in places. Um, and that's because I wasn't riding the reverb as much as maybe I could have, but I got away with it.
Mm.
And same goes for things like, any sort of delay. Like Go Penguin did one, which was great, and there was an engineer helping ride like some effects that happened on the piano, but I had a speaker and he was writing the effects live in the room. So there's sort of different rules. If you can hear it live in the room, effects are okay. Like Moses Sumney, he does a lot of effects and looping, and we had it going through a PA. So if it's something that you can see him manipulating live, or like Tosh Sultana, hers is very, very popular because she's incredible and she's got all of these loop pedals and drum machines, and she's doing it all by herself. So obviously that's so essential to her music, but because it's all happening in real time in front of you, it's perfectly okay.
Right. Yeah. And how are you dealing with last minute changes and like someone brings in an additional instrument or something like
That happens all the time. It'll be like, oh, surprise
that?
extra keyboard, surprise saxophone player. And that can often wreak havoc on my very limited number of inputs. But I'll just make a compromise. I'll say, all right, that means you don't get your own mic. You got to get closer to that person. And it seems silly in this day and age to do that. But I also, there's something really nice about making it simpler. I mean, what did the Beatles have?
Right.
4 tracks and
Yep.
bouncing?
Right. Less is more.
Can be. Yeah, that's part of the spirit of the series. Yeah, so they'll add, last minute instrumentation, or there'll be, sometimes there'll be a post-production thing, and the band will say, oh, it's publishing, I need to hear it. And, the day before it's publishing, they want to hear it, and then they want some changes
Oh,
that are level changes that are perfectly fine, and we encourage, and that's if they ask for it, we'll certainly let them do it. But it opens up a can of worms.
right.
Um, So sometimes, very rarely, we'll have to delay it. Other times it's a mad scramble and I'd have to make changes and send it back. Or I'll like watch the video on our video like preview system and I'll be like, oh man, I missed that. I didn't know they were doing something, because I'm often mixing these blind because the video team doesn't have time to cut everything together for me or
Oh,
upload
wow.
maybe the wide shot. So
Mhm.
oftentimes I'll do my first pass blind, and then I'll ask the video team to put it on their rough cut, and then I'll watch the rough cut, make all kinds of changes based on what I'm seeing, so that
Mhm.
it makes more sense geographically. And it's like if I forgot to unmute someone while they're doing a backup vocal, like, oh god, or sometimes the drummers are so quiet, and I won't hear it in the mix at all. And then I'll see it, and the video team does a close up of it because it looks really cool, and they're scraping their thing, and you can barely hear it. So I'm going in Pro Tools plus 20 dB so that I can
Yeah.
hear that tiny little cymbal thing, because you see it on the screen, you want to hear it.
Exactly. Yeah, it's super important to have the video in the end before putting it out.
Oh yes, every
See.
time. Oh yes.
All right, so let's quickly, just so everybody knows, we're gonna address some of the questions at the end, but we're gonna get to, let's take a look at some of the other of these sessions here. All right, we got another clip. You do you, I'll do me. Chilling at the bottom of the sea, and I say, I'm happy just being a prom. Oh, I'm happy just being a prom. Oh, I'm happy just being a prom. Oh, I'm happy just being a prom, prom, prom,
That's one of my favorite bands.
Lots of creative instruments.
For sure. And I would encourage everyone to go listen to these in stereo. Zoom audio is not the best, as I'm now realizing, or Facebook if you're watching there. Um, yeah, the stereo imaging is super important, but I mean, this totally translates to mono, so I feel okay with it. um, yeah, Superorganism was great because they did all the Foley. They came in and said, we were just going to put our instruments through these tiny, tiny little amps. And, you can just make those tiny, tiny little amps, or that's the way it'll sound in the room. And we're just going to have our Moog, synthesizer through this tiny little amp. We're going to have our electric guitar through this tiny little amp and all of our samples, the splashing and the foghorn through this. And I was like, okay, that's fine. And then I took everything direct and added that because I really want it to, again, sound big. If you're watching, their videos on YouTube and you just see this awesome session at KCRW or at KEXP in Seattle or at WFUV or, all of these are Audio Tree and WNYC, all these incredible sessions get taped. I don't want the tiny desk to come up and sound like you need to turn up the volume. I think my job as engineer is to make it seem authentic and true to picture, yet can hold up against their commercially produced record if it plays next in the YouTube channel.
Nice.
Yeah, I love that Superorganism. There's little moments where there's even like a ruler and he flicks the ruler. So I had a mic nearby, but like that was an instance of really having to watch that video a million times to get all of the sounds in there because he flicks the ruler, but you can't really hear it. I mean, again, I had to crank the ruler plus 36 or whatever. So I can hear that. And when he's like blowing in the bubbles, yeah, I had a mic right there. And then she's stirring the water. And so
Yeah, like a
I'm
bucket of water.
actually,
I saw a bucket of water there.
yes. So I'm duplicating tracks and, really EQing the snot, so to speak, out of that track to really emphasize where that water lives in the frequency spectrum. So even though, yes, I'm only using 16 inputs, I might have 30 tracks because I'm duplicating tracks to EQ them differently to create more mics, basically. It's what I do with the drum kit. I have, a left, a right, and a kick. And how I get the rest of the kit is with EQ.
Wow, that's great. All right, let's take a look at another one. How long do you normally have to record each set?
They usually roll in at noon, and then we sound check till 12:30, 12:45. There's a 15-minute break. We tape at 1. They're out the door by 1:30. So the entire process is never longer than an hour and a half.
Oh, wow.
It's very quick.
Yeah.
Of course, I'll run cables in advance trying to guess where people should be. I want to make sure that everybody is seen in the wide shot. That's super important to me. There's some earlier videos where musicians are blocked and that can be inevitable. Like, for example, with Tedeschi Trucks Band, which is an incredible one. They have 2 full drum kits behind there. And you see them a couple of times.
All right, let's take a look. All right. Yeah, it seemed there was quite a few of them.
It is just a wall. It's a wall of sound. So, and that I wanted to share that clip because, how do you carve out a spot for all of that instrumentation? Whew. And then when everything's, at full blast, how do you let that guitar solo go on top and give you chills?
Yeah, this was one of my questions actually is how you dealt with bleed in the mics in such a small space, especially, I mean, that you had a ton of horns there. And
Well, Yeah. So the horns I have gathered around, I think, one stereo mic. So they're just sort of, in that spot as close together, but they're of course bleeding into certainly the vocal mics. There's a stereo vocal mic for the two background vocalists. Um, Susan Tedeschi has her own vocal mic. There's a lot of bleed happening into. I'm close miking all the amps. So guitar amps for Derek trucks, of course, are close mic'd. I think in that case with like a high LPR 30. And then I've got direct outs, thank God, for the Nord keyboard. I've got a direct out of the bass head. And then of course the two drummers, I think I had just like one overhead over each and one kick over each and just pan them out. And again, I'd encourage everyone to go listen to the YouTube, which will sound much better than what you just heard.
Yeah, especially, I mean, with two drum kits, I can't imagine. Lots of lead.
Yeah, it's true. And they all, they're incredible musicians. Again, we're not using a PA. We're not using any monitors. That forces the band to play quietly enough, which we always say. And some of them come in and they do it great because they've rehearsed it and they got it down, like Tom Misch or whatever. Other bands, they're used to just playing full on. And after we let them play the first tune during sound check, it's like, all right, now remember that part where you couldn't hear the vocalist like at all? You literally have to cut your volume in half. I tell musicians to play a little more dynamically than they're used to create their own mix. In other words, if you got a super quiet verse, bands can duck down and be quiet. If some things get louder and it builds, or if it's just an instrumental part, things can really kind of pick up and get louder. Of course, I'm doing a lot of manual leveling in post production, but that helps the room and it helps the performance too, because it requires the musicians to listen to each other in a way that they're not necessarily used to doing, with being able to turn up their inner monitors exactly whatever source they want. What I love about the series is that it's really coming back to just making music in a room that has absolutely nothing to do with technology.
Nice. So no PA, no monitors, even
No
even the
PA.
drummers, nothing.
I do have, I'm lying a little bit. I fibbed. I installed some control ones with some amps up in the ceiling. If you were to go back to a photograph of the Corey Henry and the Fritz, you can actually see to the right top. I got those control ones. I got two on either side. And the only thing I'll pump up there is a very quiet vocalist if the band is too loud. And that's it. So
Nice.
I'll just send from the sound devices. Again, the sound device is 788. It's like a Swiss Army knife. Whatever signal you got coming into it, you can create multiple mixes, send it on an output, and I can just send it to the amps that power those speakers up there.
Nice. All right, let's listen to one more. Say yeah, yeah, say yeah, yeah, say oh yeah, say yeah, yeah, say yeah, say yeah, say oh yeah, say power, say power, say power, say power, say power, say power. Now somebody, everybody, let's sing. What is hip? What is hip? Tell me, does anybody out there know?
That's an instance where, am I muted? No.
No.
That that was an instance where, like, one of the best drummers in the entire world. You don't see him the whole concert, which is sad.
Well, you heard him.
Yes, you definitely hear him. He's incredible.
So let's talk a little bit about your post setup here before I pop out of your slides.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. It might be easier for me to show you on
Oh
the
yeah,
session
yeah.
I have up because
That's
then I
better.
can sort of pull it through. I'm going to share a screen. Let's see if I can do that. Okay. Can you see that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So this is the Hadestown session, and it's just a massive situation. As you can see, there's a lot of muting that's happening. I don't want any open mics when I don't need them. So this is the MS stereo here for the main center vocal mic. And then you've got, this is the probably one of the 416s. Yep. And then you've got an ear trumpet labs here. So I'm basically going through and literally muting these mics except when I need them on to kind of keep the bleed, as you were asking about, down. And then you can see how the MS is decoded here, obviously with this MS matrix situation. And you'll see that the top channel is the left capsule and the bottom channel is the bidirectional right capsule, and then it gets decoded. And then I'll bus all of my vocals basically through a vocal bus here somewhere where I'll roll off the low end. I'll use RVox to get things nice and kind of on top, and just a tick of this reverb to give it some air. I mean, it's so barely anything. And then other things, I've got a parallel compression on the drums through this comp bus. Because really on the drummer, all I have is there. Yeah, so again, I'm just muting lots of stuff. So for example, I've got KM84 for kit left and a KM84 for kit right. Sometimes I'll use the Glenn Johns style of recording where the left capsule will be directly above the snare drum and the right capsule will be just sort of like between the left side crash and floor tom, and then a kick mic, and that's it. So two KM84s and a Heil PR40. And this is the kind of EQing I'll do with Renaissance R channel to really get that floor tom out and some cymbal happening. And then this, I guess, is for the snare and the rack tom. And then the kick, I'll really get some thump in there. I'll really want to feel that thump. And then for the example for the cello and the violin, because I've got the ear trumpet labs on the cello and a Sheps cardioid on the violin, but you'll see I'll do this sort of EQ to get the cello happening, and I'm just using my ears. These aren't hard set rules at all. There's obviously some compression, but then I'll put on the ozone imager that I was telling you about to stereoize everything so that it won't sound so mono. So you can see that's what it would look like on your phase scope in mono, but by section that's not muted. So if I switch to stereoize, it gives it a sense of what it would sound like, to your ear. And even though I have them panned out a bit, I've got, because the cello is to the left and the violin is to the right, I'll still put a stereoizer, even though I'll pan it as well, because it just makes it sound more real. Obviously don't need to put a stereoizer on the piano because I've got the two MKH40s there. A little bit of EQ, I put on a little reverb on the piano, but again, just barely. This is just, this is not a lot. It's kind of what I can get away with. Little reverb on the accordion. The trombone has a little bit of reverb on it too, and on the acoustic guitar, as well as an imager on the acoustic guitar. And then on the master bus, I'll use ozone to get things just kind of take it to that next level with ozone. And just play around with different settings. I usually like the equalizer and imager, which actually I don't have this on at all. Some dynamic with crossover EQ and a tiny bit of maximizing just to kind of get it all together. And then I'll run everything through RX loudness for my report card to make sure that I'm at around -15 or -16 LUFS.
Very cool. I believe that was actually what somebody put that question in there, what you were mixing to. So there's that answer.
Yay.
Yay. Have you ever had to do a second take? Has any artist ever requested to do it again?
Yeah, sometimes, they'll get like a verse in and say, "Oh, let me just start over." And that's absolutely fine. We're taping, that we encourage that. And then sometimes at the very end, they're like, "You know what? I really kind of messed up that lyric. Can I just do it again?" And we say, "Of course, yes." One time when we had the Free Nationals in recently, and Anderson Paak was on doing the Gidget song for his cameo, um, his shotgun mic at the kit kind of got knocked out of the way. So it was sort of facing out, and his vocal was super important. So I let them actually get through the song. And then I jumped up on the desk right after they were finished. It was a great take. I'm just applauding. Woo, that was awesome. And then I actually just jumped down and said, "Would you guys mind doing it just one more time? Mic in a better spot." And they're like, "Oh, okay." And then ended up being even better because he started out the take with "Yes, Lord," and I was like, "Ah, oh, this is so great." And of course, everyone in the room wanted to hear it again. So in that instance, it is your responsibility as the audio engineer to get what you need and try not to fix it in post. Although there is a lot of fixing in post that has to happen, especially with this Hadestown session when the three fates weren't necessarily right on mic. I had a very hard time, and sometimes I just duplicated that side channel because fates that were on either side were a little bit lower. So I could sort of like bring in more of the side channel on its own channel and EQ it properly to kind of help that out a bit. And it's close. Same with Alicia Keys. She sang everywhere but on mic. I mean, it was like, and that just took a lot of writing. That was really hard. It came out fine, and it's forgivable because you can see it. You're like, oh, okay, I get it. But that's one of the detriments of using those shotguns. I love them because you don't have to get the mic close to the performer. You can see the whole face, which I think is awesome. There's no headphones on. It's so pure. It's so wonderful. Um, but because it can be further away, you also have, and it's very directional. You don't necessarily have as much control when they get off axis. It sounds it, and it's just sort of one of those um, things that I don't mind the compromise.
You just kind of ride the levels in those cases, or
Yep, riding levels like crazy. Leanne LaHavas, she was like singing super quiet for this part, and then she was singing at the top of her lungs for Forget. Oh my god! So I had it at plus 20 to like 0, and literally that dramatic, maybe even more. It could have been 36 and 0. It was
wow.
and the trick to that is knowing when to fade back down. And I was like, I think that is where my ear came in handy, was knowing how to transition from those super high levels to super low levels and where to make that transition happen and how to make it completely forgivable.
I wonder, in your session with, muting out some of the bleed and stuff. A lot of times, if you are recording live, you can kind of hear things coming in and out when you do
Yes.
that. So how do you manage that?
Again, I use my ears. If it's too much, I'll leave something in. I always leave in the MS stereo. So that main center stereo mic, that one will always stay on. So it's not like things will ever get muted entirely. Then if I notice something, dropping in and out, I'll just keep that channel in, but at like, -10 instead of 0. So you don't hear it drop out. Or I can ride my audience mics. I'm just literally making a ton of um, volume decisions every second of the concert that makes all that stuff hopefully sound seamless. Some of my earlier work, you can hear it. I'm trying to remember which one. I'm not going to call it out, but you can hear it sometimes when it's just like, oh, wow, I just heard that vocal might kind of drop out. Something dropped out in the mix, but I've gotten better over the years. It's been 5 years now that I've been doing these. So I'm starting to kind of like get into the rhythm.
Yeah, we all have those ones that you look back at and say, "Why?
Can
Why?"
I just do it again? I just want to
Maybe
do
we'll
it
just redo
again.
it. Yeah. I guess I'm just gonna ask you one last question here, and then we'll address questions from the audience. What's your advice to anyone doing live recording or wanting to get started?
Pound the Pavement worked really well for me, just walking in off the street, really for a tour. And I ended up getting some freelance work, and that ended up turning into an entire career that I always thought I was going to be doing mixing wireless mics for live theater. And this took me on a completely different path because I pounded the pavement and just walked through a door. It's obviously not that easy, but find what you love and and find someone that you admire what they're doing and find out, what their path was and any advice they might have. Certainly getting involved with internships, working as much as you can to get as much experience as you can. Um, and then in terms of the work itself, just using your ears, get down on the ground, stick your ear where it sounds good, and then replace it with a mic.
Cool. All right, so let's I'm gonna go through the comments. If you have questions, go ahead and put them in the comments, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. Just we have one question here. Do you take notes when you're recording?
Sometimes very minimal notes like who's singing when, if I have a quick turnover, like for the when we did the festival where we had 4 concerts live and then we had to flip them for post-production really quickly. We live streamed them. I ran everything through a TC Electronics finalizer and after my like live mix, and I thought it sounded great. I was really happy with it, but figured, why not make it good um, for the one that lives up there forever. So we had Wale and we had um, Meg the Stallion and Raphael Sadiq, um, and I had to flip them really quick. What was the beginning of the question?
Just if you were taking notes when you were recording.
Oh, notes, right. Oh gosh. So yeah, maybe minimally, but no, not really. I'm not a fan of notes. I'm a fan of paying attention. And that's why like right after a session, I'll transfer all of my files directly into Pro Tools and I'll do a rough mix immediately after because I hate taking notes that much. That's the answer.
Excellent. When you're writing levels, is that happening in live or in post?
I'm definitely writing levels live for my rough mix, but then, because I always think of my rough mix as an emergency backup. So I'm always mixing live as if it's for real. And honestly, a lot of the live mixes sound fantastic and they might even sound better than what I do in Pro Tools. You just never know, it's like too much effort sometimes is a detriment. But what you hear on YouTube is not live. The only time you've heard things live is during the festival, which we were going to do again in November, but it's probably going to be postponed.
Who knows where we'll
We'll
be?
do it again, though. I loved it. And there could be an instance where we start doing concerts again in the office. We're not going to have an audience in the room. So
Mhm.
I'll certainly be pitching the idea, hey, let's just live stream these,
Yeah, that's
which
a great idea.
I'd be thrilled about. And then we can still, fine tune them and make them perfect for whatever lives on forever. But I
Right.
love the idea of live streaming them,
Nice.
especially if we can't have an audience in the room.
Cool. Where is your mix location? Are you in the same room? And if not, are you using speakers versus phones? And then to piggyback off that, somebody asked what kind of headphones you were using.
Yes, I am in the same room for sure. There's not a lot of isolation. Oftentimes I use these headphones.
You can
It's
kind of
so
see it.
hard
It's
to get
getting
them in the
lost in the
shot.
virtual
That's so
background. Yeah.
funny. These are the Shure. Here we
There we
go. These sound real good.
go.
They're super soft, closed ear, very lightweight, 50 something somethings. I actually don't know the model number. I also will mix sometimes with the Grados, which of course I love an open ear
Yeah, nice.
experience when I'm mixing. Um, I think that the silver ones, they're kind of expensive. I forgot the model number. But all the Grados are awesome from top to bottom. And then I've got some cheap Casas that I love. The Porta Pros. Oh, I'm a big fan of the Porta Pros. Just for like I think they're $30 or $40, and they sound awesome for just like open ear live mixing. For tracking, not so great because they're open.
Hmm.
But these are my favorite for closed. I also use the oh, what are they called? I'm blanking. I can't remember the name of them. That sucks.
You can put it in the
I
comments.
wrote, yeah, I wrote a whole article on headphones, and they're in there.
Oh,
So,
nice. Great.
yeah, it's called Tiny Tech Tips headphones. You can search for that. It's all my favorite headphones.
Great. I guess this is related to the MS and the yo-yo. How much time do you spend on correcting phase? I guess this is
Um,
in relation to the MS decoding.
I see. Yeah, I just choose in terms of how much width needs to be there. So not a lot of time at all. It's usually if I can capture it correctly, I won't need to fix it in post. Um, but I'll look at a phase scope and see what's happening. I'll listen to it in mono, like we just did, and pray that there isn't too much
Mm.
cancellation. It's super important to listen to all of your work in mono. I'm thankfully not mortified on the examples we just heard.
And I get this was whacked with the yo-yo ma as well. Why is the 418 pointing up and not at the cello?
That's because I was using that to capture his speaking voice between music for the most part. So that was really focused on him talking. And then it was a much more of sort of an ambient mic. So it was less important. What I used to really pick up the nuance of the cello was the close mic, the small condenser, um, MKH40, which I also use other stuff too. I've used the blue mouse on a cello up close. It sounded pretty good. I also like that Your Trumpet Lab stuff for some pretty affordable, awesome steampunky styly mics. I think for around
Mm.
$600 you can get a really nice large diaphragm mic that a lot of bluegrass folks use.
Nice. And this is kind of a comment slash question. The marching band must have been a real challenge.
Oh, for the roots or which one?
Um, this was who was the question? James Tobias. Can you clarify which marching band? A marching?
Yeah, we've done Red Barat had a big walk-in moment that was hard to capture. I put on one of those electrosonic self-recorder little jobbies on his drum, and I also had like another 418S on the path that they walked into the office on. For the roots, I had a wireless setup on the tuba player, and since he started the walk-in, it all sounds beautiful and on mic because I didn't really want it to fade in. I wanted it to start strong,
Mhm.
and setting him up with wireless was the right way to go. I don't use wireless unless I absolutely have to.
Nice. Do you use references when you're mixing, or
Does
any particular live albums you look to as touchstones?
Yeah, I'll try to get a sense of what their music sounds like on their album, although of course I'll make it sound very different, but at least I want to get a sense of it in terms of especially if it's like more electronic music, I might want to get a sense of the balance for like Arthur Moon, for example, when there's lots of electronic stuff going on. I like to have at least like a guide of, oh, what did they want it to sound like? Because I really don't know how loud I should make this keyboard part because it's all taste and subjective. And it just depends. Sometimes I won't, and I'll just mix it blind for myself. I think I just trust my own tastes and sensibilities first and foremost, and that other stuff is less important to me unless the artist specifically asks for things like, all right, well, your instinct might be to bring the background vocals to be really low, but in reality, I want them the same volume as my vocal. So there's certain things that I try to respect, obviously, what the artist intended.
Nice. Do you use Omni condensers sometimes?
Yeah, the Omni condensers right now are hanging above the desk to pick up the audience because I kind of wanted the sound of the space and to get all sort of the applause. They're also facing the musicians. They're up in the air, kind of above the audience's head. And I feel that gives a very sort of natural sense of what it's like to be there. I thought about playing with maybe some omnis on piano. I always stick to the cardioids because everything's on top of each other. I
Mm.
want as much directional capture as I can get away with because I'm constantly battling lots and lots of bleed. So cardioids and hypercardioids are my friend, especially when I don't want mics and faces. So
Right. Nice. I think we just I think that's it for the questions. With just some clarity on here, the band where everyone was standing all over the desk and around 20 people with for the marching band. So I'm not sure if that was one of the ones you meant.
oh was that Hades Town? I'm not sure. Marching. Oh,
Um,
20
yeah,
people gathered around the desk. I'm
yeah, a
trying to
marching.
think.
It was in reference to the marching.
Oh, they might be talking about like Machu. I forgot the name of them. I didn't record that one. If it's the marching band I'm thinking of, where there's like literally 24 people.
Mhm.
I'm not familiar with that one at all. But the Red Barat and the Roots, those both felt like marching band-ish because they
Mm,
walked in from off camera.
nice. I guess with this, we just have time for this last final question, which is actually a nice one to end on. What's a dream band that you want to record and haven't yet?
Ooh, there's a lot. Living or dead?
Dead seems like it might not happen,
Oh,
but
right. Shoot. Forgot. Certainly, everyone's clamoring for Wolfpack. I think that'd be hilarious because they did a video with like a fake cutout of a very badly photoshopped like this Tiny Desk in their video, and I thought that was great. It's just very much trolling. So they'd be fun. Um, who else? Radiohead, of course, would be an amazing get, and weird and ethereal and intense. We've had a few of their band members do stuff. Johnny Greenwood did a commission piece, the classical piece that we had on, which was amazing. And Colin played bass on uh, one of the artists who've been through whose name's escaping me. There's been a lot. So
I think we'd all be here for a Radiohead Tiny Desk.
I think so too.
Very good. Well, I want to thank everybody for watching. Thank Eventide for supporting our events. Josh, thank you so much for giving us this hour of your time.
It was so fun. Thanks for doing it.
And I hope you guys will all tune back in. We've got some other great events coming up soon. So keep watching the page for more info.
Keep
All
safe,
right.
y'all.